Back in 2018, I got a phone call from someone that I had known for years, and they had just reached out and asked a question if I would come and shoot some videos for them. It was a church in Chilhowie, Virginia, and so I ended up going down, shot some videos for them. I didn't know at the time, but what they were actually wanting was to meet me and consider bringing me on as a staff person. And so ended up after some time, and we talked, we prayed, felt like this is where God wanted us to go, and made the move. And I had a dinner scheduled the first weekend that I was supposed to be in town, and so I went to dinner with all the elders, some of the current staff at the time, and we had gotten back, and I didn't actually have any plans of where I was going to stay because I had an apartment that was supposed to have been ready by this time, but it was running an entire month behind. And I knew that, but I didn't really know what to do. So my plan, and I didn't know anyone down there at the time, I was just going to sleep in my car for the first month, but I didn't want to tell anyone that, like family or anyone there, because I was, that would be a little embarrassing. So, but that was the plan. I was like, I'll be fine. I'll just sleep in my car for this first month. And we get back from dinner that night from being out with the elders and some of the staff, and one of the elders kind of hung around for a little bit, and he was one of the last ones to leave, and he said, "Hey, what are your plans tonight?" And immediately I'm like, I don't want to tell this guy I'm sleeping in my car. Like, this is the first time we've met. Like, I literally had never had a conversation until that night. And so I was like, I don't really know. And he said, well, I've got plans for you. Me and my wife already have a room prepared for you and a place for you to stay as long as you need. And they had their house set up and ready for me to come and sleep in, someone that they had never met before, ever. Like, not one time until that night. And I slept there for the first month that I was working in Chilhowie. And I'll tell you that because today we're starting a series about the church. And I don't know what you think of when you think of church, but I'm hoping that after today and through over the next few weeks that we can begin painting a picture of what the church actually is. And I want to tell you that story that I just told you. The reason I'm telling you is because it is a very small picture, but it is a picture of what it means to be the church. It was one of the coolest things that had happened to me, that this family that I didn't know offered a place in their home for me. And then Haley and I were not married at the time, and so when she would come down on the weekends, they set up another room in their house just for her. Again, someone they had never met. It was awesome. But what I want to do today is I want us to walk through, again, painting a picture of what is the church according to the scriptures. Not just like, what do we think of? Because if we went around the room today and said, what do you think of when you think of church? I guarantee we'd get all kinds of different answers. Like, some of you, and we just want to acknowledge, have had a horrible experience with the church. Like when you think of the church, you think of very traumatic situations, or maybe you just think of really boring things, and you think of useless things and a waste of time. And like, I get it. That would be some of my thoughts as well, growing up, thinking, man, why do we even do this? What's the point? Like, why does any of this even matter? Some of you may be thinking, when you think about the church, you think about things like a building. And if you look it up in the dictionary right now, what does the word church mean? You're going to find a religious building, a place where Christians meet. And for some of you, that might be what you think of. I mean, some of us say things like, hey, I'm going to meet at the church, right? Or I'm going to the church, and it refers to this place that we meet on Sundays. For some of us, maybe it's just that it's an event. It's a thing that happens on Sunday mornings. Maybe that's what you think of when you think about church. It's this just thing. It's an hour of my life every week that we do on Sundays. For some of you, maybe it's an organization. It's this thing that does these gatherings and these events, and they own buildings, but like the church is this organization. And for some of you, maybe you just think of leaders, pastors, ministry, like whatever it is. You think of that when you think about the church. For some of you, maybe it's different than that. It's not those things. Again, it's traumatic experiences that you had. It's stories of people who took advantage of you or someone else that you loved. You think of someone or something that was money hungry. You think of abuse. I don't know what it is for you that you think of, but every one of us have a different story and a different picture in our minds when we hear the word church. Some positive, some negative, but what I want to do today is I want us to work back through the scriptures and get a more accurate picture, not of just what we've experienced, but what Jesus intended for his church to be. Because really, in reality, we don't formulate, and we shouldn't be a church that's based on what I want or what you want. We want to be a church that's based on what Jesus wants. Like, we want to look and see what is it that he desires for this thing called the church to be, and let's run after it. Let's go after that. And so when we see the church, the word church show up for the first time in the scriptures, it's Jesus using it. It's right after he's having this conversation with Peter. Peter makes this confession, and then he says, and on this rock I will build my church. And that word in the original language is the word ecclesia. That's what the original word, ecclesia. And it just means a movement of called out ones. That's what it means. It doesn't have anything to do with a building. It doesn't have anything to do with gatherings. It doesn't have anything to do with events, organizations, leaders, none of those things. The word church just means this, a movement of called out ones. That's it. A movement of called out ones, a people who have been called out from death and into life and set apart, for good things, for good works. There's three elements I want you to think about when we think about the word church that I think we see, again, showing up in the scriptures. There's three kind of layers to this word church. The first layer is that the church is made up of believers, these called out ones. It's individual believers in Jesus, individual Christians. That's the first layer. The second layer is local assemblies of Christians, of those called out ones that gather. Things like what we're doing this morning. Like, we are a church, a local church. But within that, there are Christians that make up that church. And then the third layer, which is the big layer, which is the universal church, meaning it's every believer across the world. It all belongs to the same church. And so I want to help you. If you ever hear me say the church, just so you know, I'm never referring to Blacksburg Church. Anytime you hear me say the word or say the church, I'm referring to the universal church, the all believers all over the world. That would say Jesus is Lord and that are part of his church. If I say this church, I might be referring to this local assembly. But there's a couple of things that are important, because today it's become common and it's become popular because of this reaction to what has become the American church. We have this idea that, well, just because I'm an individual part of that church, as we said, that's one of the layers, we just reject anything beyond that, any other layer. And we just go and do our own thing and say, well, I'm the church. I'm the church. I've had multiple conversations with people say, I don't need anything regarding local assemblies or the universal church. I am the church. And I would just push back on you just a little bit and challenge you to say, thank you, Isla, you agree. I would push back on you just a little bit. And here's what I would say, is that I individually am not the church. You individually are not the church, but we are the church. You get what I'm saying? Individually, we're not the church. It's when we're together that we're the church. Think about it this way. Even the building we're in this morning, or a home that maybe the house that you live in, it is made from many different materials. Like there's wood in that house. There's screws. There's nails. There's metal. There's lots of different materials that go into building a home. But no one looks at a 2x4 and says, that's a home. That's a house. Right? Like, it's not when it's by itself that it's a home. It's when it is part of something larger. It's when it's in this thing that when it's together, it becomes the church. And to push that analogy even further, every room in a house is made of different materials. And when those rooms come together and those rooms are one, then it's a home. Even a room by itself, if you somehow took your living room out of your house and just had it out in your yard, your living room is no longer part of the house, right? Like, it's when it's part of this, it's all together. It's the collection. It's the coming together that makes it the church. And so again, I want you to hear, I want to push on you a little bit and say, no, individually, you and I are not the church, but we are the church. The church isn't a building. The church isn't an event. It's not an organization. It is a people. And the simplest definition I can give you is this. It is a people who love Jesus and love one another. That's what the church is. In its simplest definition, it's a people who love Jesus and love one another. And so if we are the church and the church isn't all of those other things, what does it mean then for the church to be healthy? Because just because a church exists doesn't mean it's healthy. It's just like, just because you see a person walking around who's alive and their eyes are open and their heart beats doesn't mean they're healthy, right? Like not everyone's healthy. But I would say the same is true of the church. The church is this living thing and it's not always healthy. And I just want to say I'm sorry if your example, your experience with the church was not one of health, but instead it was an experience with an unhealthy church. And I want to today, what we're going to do, this series is called, as you can see on the screen, Healthy, Growing, and Full of Love. It's really creative, I know. And you were probably like, wow, how did you come up with that? It's very creative. It comes straight out of Ephesians chapter 4. But what I want you to see is that we are a church not in pursuit of a size, but in pursuit of being healthy. And here's the whole premise of this series, that if we'll be a healthy church, the inevitable result of a healthy church is a growing church. It's impossible for the church to be healthy and not grow, but it is totally possible to not be healthy and to grow. That might sound a little strange to you, but hang in there with me. It's impossible to be a healthy church and not a growing church, but it's possible to be a growing church and not a healthy one. And the way you know a growing church is a healthy church, you want to know how? The bottom, it's full of love. And we're going to spend time over the next 3 weeks working through each of those. And today our focus is, if that's the church, what is a healthy one? If the church is a people, how do we know, or how do we become healthy? And I don't think we need to look at anyone else's words except for Jesus. And so in John chapter 17, this is where we're going to pick up first, and then we're going to spend the rest of our time over in Ephesians. But listen to what John chapter 17, beginning in verse 13, says. Again, John chapter 17, verse 13. And these are the words of Jesus. This is his prayer right before he's crucified. Meaning, if Jesus prays this as the last prayer before his crucifixion, it's probably important. And listen to what he says. Now I am coming to you. I told them many things while I was with them, talking about his disciples in this world, so they would be filled with my joy. I have given them your word, and the world hates them because they do not belong to the world, just as I do not belong to the world. I'm not asking you to take them out of the world, but to keep them safe from the evil one. They do not belong to this world any more than I do. Make them holy by your truth. Teach them your word, which is truth. Just as you sent me into the world, I am sending them into the world, and I give myself as a holy sacrifice for them, so they can be made holy by your truth. Now listen to what Jesus says right here. I am praying not only for these disciples, talking about the ones that had been following him, the 12 that walked with him. I'm not praying not only for these disciples, but also for all who will ever believe in me through their message. This is a prayer from Jesus about you. Like, this is a prayer from Jesus about us. He's praying for us right now. And listen to what he says. I pray that they will all be one, just as you and I are one. As you are in me, Father, and I am in you, and may they be in us, so that the world will believe you have sent me. I've given them the glory you gave me, so they may be one as we are one. I am in them, and you are in me. May they experience such perfect unity that the world will know that you sent me and that you love them as much as you love me. Father, I want these whom you have given me to be with me where I am. Then they can see all the glory you gave me because you loved me even before the world began. Did you catch what Jesus just prayed for? Again, he's praying for you and I, but the thing Jesus prays would be true of his church is that it would be united. The thing Jesus prays for was unity. Like if we are going to define what a healthy church is, we have to start with that as its foundation. What we're not going to talk about today is our preaching. What we're not going to talk about today is worship and the quality of the sound and the building that we meet. None of those. Listen, those things can help. We can talk about those things later. But the foundation of a healthy church is a unified church. It's a united church. If it's not united, the rest of it doesn't matter. None of the other stuff matters. According to Jesus, this is what matters. It's the foundation everything else is built on. In fact, unity is one of the most powerful things in the world, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as we go. But it's one of the most powerful things in the world. And so, if Jesus says that's what we must do, we need to look at the rest of the scriptures and say, well, what does it mean then that we're united? And luckily for you and I, Paul, a guy who followed Jesus later in his life, because the beginning of his life, he hated Jesus, he hated Christians, so much so that he actually would hunt them down, arrest them, and even kill them. Paul hated Christians. And yet, this is the guy who wrote the majority of our New Testament. And he writes, after he has this incredible encounter with Jesus, he becomes a missionary to the Gentiles, and he writes this letter to the church in Ephesus, and he says, hey, this is what it means to be united. Here's what it means to be a united church, and that's what we're going to spend the rest of our time doing today. So we're going to look at Ephesians chapter 4, and what Paul says is a healthy church. And so he lists 3 things that keep us united, and we're going to look at all 3 of those, starting with the first one. And the first one comes out of verse 1. Let's read this together. Verse 1. Therefore, I, a prisoner for serving the Lord, beg you to lead a life worthy of your calling, for you have been called by God. The very first thing, the first thing that keeps us united is our own posture. Meaning, Paul speaks first, not to the second layer, meaning the local assembly. Even though he's writing this letter to the local assembly, he is speaking to individuals within it. You know, if you ever tried to build a house and you use really bad materials, it doesn't matter how good the exterior looks, eventually that house is going to fall down. Right? If the materials that make up the church, the individuals that make it up, if they're unhealthy and are not what we're seeing right here, we're never going to be a united church. We can talk about structural things, we could talk about leadership things, but ultimately, the first at the core of being united is our own posture as individuals. And Paul addresses not the whole church, he addresses individuals. And what does he say? A healthy church begins with you. He says, live worthy of the calling that you have been called. Let's check this out again in verse 1. Lead a life worthy of your calling, for you have been called by God. Now, for some of us, when we hear that, we think about, so I got to follow all the rules. And if I don't follow all the rules, if I don't do everything that's in that book, I'm not worthy anymore. I'm out. I'm no longer part of this thing. But notice how Paul writes this. He says, live a life worthy of your calling. But what does he say? A past tense, you've already been called. Like the calling's already happened. It isn't contingent on whether you live worthy. He's just saying now that you are in the promise, you've received Christ. Now, on the other side, live worthy. And then he paints a picture of what it means to live worthy. But before I say that, I need you to hear that. He is not sitting back thinking, well, you can be part of this. You can join this. You can do these things if you live a certain way. But what he is saying, and he is encouraging us, is for those of you who have already been called, who are already part, not because you're good, but because Jesus was good, now live worthy of the calling. And so what does that mean? How do we live worthy? We'll look at verse 2. Always be humble and gentle. Be patient with each other, making allowance for each other's faults because of your love. Always be humble and gentle. How do we live worthy of the calling? Well, the first thing Paul tells us is always be humble and gentle. I don't know about you, but when I read that, and oftentimes when I think about Christians, to be real honest, I think about people with no backbone and they're sissies. That's what comes to my mind. People who are the doormat for everyone else. And I'm going to guess maybe for some of you, you probably have that same thought when you read something like this that says always be humble and gentle. Maybe that's what comes to mind for you, but I would just push back a little bit on you and say humility is not weakness. I think humility often gets confused for weakness, right? We look at someone who is a doormat, someone who always lets people walk all over them, never stands up for themselves or for anyone else, and then we go, wow, they're so humble. No, they're not humble. I'm going to say this gently if that's you, but that's weakness. That's not humility. See, humility will always be paired with confidence. You know what humility actually is? Humility is just great power under control. That's what humility is. It's great power under control. I don't know if you would say this, but I would say the most humble person in history was Jesus. Like if there was anyone who was humble, it would be Jesus, the same guy who created all things. We heard that this morning. The same guy who created all things was the most humble person ever. If anyone had the right to not be humble, it would be Jesus. And yet he was humble. I would say he's the most humble and the most gentle, and yet he went into the temple with a whip, flipping tables and casting people out. I don't know about you, but I don't know if in my mind I'm thinking, well, is that really humble and gentle? Yeah, it was. It was humble and gentle. Humble and gentle doesn't mean weak. It doesn't mean a pushover. It means great power that's under control. And then he says, be patient with one another. Be patient. And why? Make allowance for each other's faults. Paul makes an assumption that faults already exist, right? Like Paul's not saying, in case there is a fault, in case something goes wrong, when it, if it happens, be patient. No, he's saying like when it happens, like there will be faults. Heads up, none of us are perfect. And none of us have all of our life together. There's none of us in this room who actually do. And if you feel like right now you're in a great spot, you've got your life figured out, it's probably because you just came out of something or you're about to go back into it, right? Life is chaotic. Life has these ups and downs. And we need to be patient with one another and make allowance for each other. In case you're wondering, this is not and will never be a perfect church. Never. Let me just say, if at any point we get to a place where we feel like, man, there's just no problems here, I promise you, I will no longer be here. Okay? I don't want anything to do with a church where everyone, oh yeah, man, they really have their crap together there. Like I just don't want anything to do with that church because it's not real. The reality is, as we follow Jesus, we're going to make mistakes, we're going to fall short, and we are patient with one another in the process. We make allowance for each other's faults, and we do it. Why? Because we love one another. A couple years ago, a guy that I deeply loved and still do, him and his wife, incredible. And I got a phone call from him one night, and he said, I need to meet with you, and I need to talk to you. And he came and confessed to a multiple year affair. And we got to sit and cry together. And then we got to step out of that room, not with him full of shame, not with him full of guilt, but instead to walk back to his wife and to love her and serve her. And now today they're still married, loving one another and loving Jesus. Not because of anything I said, but the point being is because they were part of a church that loved them. In spite of all the chaos, in spite of the crap that was going on in their life, it didn't prevent us from loving them. It was an opportunity to love them. Like it wasn't, no, we don't want you here anymore. You need to go find somewhere else. You need to go isolate yourself. No, it was, this is where you need to be, right here with these people who know the worst parts of you and still love you anyway. They love you anyway. There was another situation we had where a husband had left his wife and kids multiple times. And some of the guys that loved him went and found him and sat him down and called him out on his crap. Called him out on the fact that he was treating his family so poorly. But they loved him through it. You know what happened on the other side? It didn't work out. I would love to tell you, man, the end of that story was they got together and they were together. That's not what happened. Instead, he left, and in the wake was a wife and kids. And you know what got to happen? The church got to surround them and love them. The bills were able to be paid. Kids were taken care of. Men came around and said, that's not what a godly man looks like. I want to show you. Went and picked the kids up, took them places, took them on trips, loved them well, paid bills. loved that family so well and continues to do so. We make allowance for each other's faults, and we're patient with one another. Why? Because we love one another. Let's look at verse 3. Make every effort to keep yourselves united in the Spirit, binding yourselves together with peace. Unity isn't something that you and I can create. Unity is something that's given, that's established, not because of anything we've done. It's something that we keep. So maybe some of your translations might say it's to be maintained, meaning it's not something we create, it's something that we watch over and that we protect. It's to be kept up and maintained. Why? Well, where does this unity come from? Well, look at what he says. You're binding yourselves together with peace. It's united where? In the Spirit. The Holy Spirit that lives in us is why we're united. Because the same Spirit that lives in me lives in you. And we get to love one another, knowing that that is the thing that unites us. And so, first and foremost, the first thing that keeps us united is our own posture as individuals. That's the first thing. We have to understand that it's our responsibility, and that we walk worthy of the calling we've received, that we're patient with one another, that we make allowance for each other's faults because we love each other, and then we don't try to create it, we maintain unity, and we do it how? Go back to verse 3 for me, Haley. We make every effort, meaning that unity isn't the default position of us as people. If anything, it's the opposite. Like our default position is divisive. Right? Someone says something to us. What's the easiest thing to do? Leave. I don't like what you said to me. I'm just going to go to another place. It happens literally all the time. If it hasn't happened to you yet, I promise you at some point while you're hanging out, you're going to get offended. Someone's going to say something to you that you don't like. It's going to happen. But we make every effort. We work hard to maintain the unity that we have received. And so again, the first thing that keeps us united as individuals that make up the church, it's our own posture. The second thing Paul brings to us begins in verse 4, and it's this: it's our beliefs. Check out verse 4 for me. For there is one body and one Spirit, just as you have been called to one glorious hope for the future. There is one Lord, one faith, one baptism, and one God and Father of all, who is over all, in all, and living through all. See, unity is too powerful to not be guided by truth. Honestly, unity is one of the most powerful things in the universe. And no, I didn't get that off a t-shirt or a coffee mug. It really is one of the most powerful things in the universe. It's so powerful, it shows up early in the scriptures, actually in Genesis chapter 11, where we find the story of the Tower of Babel. Now, I'm not going to get all into the story, but the point being, these people said, we're going to build a tower, and we're going to get it as high as we can because we're going to make ourselves famous. And they all spoke the same language, and they were united around this mission. And then look what happens. Look what God says. Look, he said, the people are united, and they all speak the same language. After this, nothing they set out to do will be impossible for them. Come, let's go down and confuse the people with different languages. Then they won't be able to understand each other. God prevented them from being united when they were united around the wrong thing. Now, I don't think God's going to come down and give us different languages and confuse us, but I will say, being united around the wrong thing, you can still go a long ways. You can still accomplish a lot of things. We have to be guided by something that's true in our unity. Because if we're not, we may accomplish much, but what if it's accomplishing much of the wrong thing? Another thing I want you to know is that these right here are what we would call, Haley, if you'll go back to verse 4 for me, these are what we would call the essentials. These are the things that have united believers really for 2,000 years. Paul was writing to Ephesus. It was a very pagan area with many different religions, many different beliefs. And he's saying, hey, these are the things that make you one. These are the beliefs that should unite you. And they have united the church for 2,000 years. He says there's one body, meaning there's one church. Remember what we talked about? There's three layers: individuals, there's local assemblies, and then there's the universal church. Every believer is part of what's called the one body. And he says there's one Spirit, that's the Holy Spirit. Just as you have been called to one glorious hope, it's the good news of the gospel that without Jesus, you and I have no hope. We only have one hope, and it's in him. There's one Lord, that's Jesus. One faith. This is the what we would probably easiest way to refer to this would be like it's biblical Christianity. It's not just Christianity that we made up on our own. It's what comes out of this book that we've been given. It's that faith. There's one faith. There's one baptism. It's the uniting with Christ. It's being identified with him in his death, burial, and resurrection. And then there's one God and Father of all, not a bunch of gods. There's one, and he's over all, in all, and living through all. These are the essentials, meaning that there are a lot of things that you and I can believe that are outside of that, and they're secondary. Meaning they don't really matter. Our movement of churches, I mean, when I say that, there are other churches that we would connect with that have supported and worked alongside us. It's called the Restoration Movement of Churches, meaning it was just a group of people who said, let's focus on the essentials and let's not get caught up on secondary things. Meaning that whether you believe in a young earth or an old earth is irrelevant. Like, I don't care if you believe the earth is old or you believe the earth is young. It doesn't matter. If you believe God created in 6 literal days versus thousands of years, millions of years, but it doesn't matter. That's okay. We can agree, we can disagree. It doesn't matter. You can disagree on whether Jesus is coming back in this way or this way. It doesn't matter. I could go down the list, but there's lots of things. But here's the phrase you can remember if you're wondering why we say it and what we would say. It's that in essentials, we must have unity. In non-essentials, there's liberty, but in all things, we love. In essentials, unity, and non-essentials, liberty, in all things, love. I'm just going to tell you, in case you're wondering, you're not going to hear a lot here at this church about secondary issues and being taught as essential things. You're just not going to. And so if you're looking for a place that's going to tell you what you need to believe about the end times, or someone who's going to tell you about what you have to believe about Genesis, I'm sorry, this is probably not the church for you. Like, we're going to focus on Jesus. We're going to focus on what is essential and how to live that out. Because secondary issues aren't that important. Do I have beliefs about them? Yes. Do we have things that we would say as a church? Yes, but I don't really care if you disagree. It's okay. We can be united on what matters. Again, unity must be guided by truth. And so what is that truth? Well, Paul gives us a few things there. And so our posture keeps us united. Our beliefs keep us united. Here's the third thing that keeps us united. Verse 7. However, he has given each one of us a special gift through the generosity of Christ. That is why the scriptures say when he ascended to the heights, he led a crowd of captives and gave gifts to his people. The third thing that keeps us united is our gifts. And when I'm saying our gifts, I'm talking about our spiritual gifts. That everyone who has believed in Jesus, received the Holy Spirit, has been given a spiritual gift. And a spiritual gift is different than a natural gift. A natural gift is something that God gave you. A spiritual gift is something the Holy Spirit gives you. See, every one of us were created by God. God gave us gifts that are natural abilities. Some of you are incredible. Maybe it's at music. Some of you are incredible, at math. I don't know, whatever it is for you. Athletics, you're whatever. There's lots of things that you may be great at, and those are God-given gifts. But then there's another layer, and it's the spiritual gifts. These come from the Holy Spirit, and every believer has one. And we're told and we're going to get into this as we go further in the series, in Romans 12, 1 Corinthians 12, that these gifts are not given for no purpose. They're given for a very specific purpose, and it's to serve one another. Meaning the Holy Spirit is going to give you and I gifts that other people around us are in need of. And let me say it this way. He has designed the church in such a way that we are interdependent on one another. Meaning there are things that I need from you, and there are things you need from me. Meaning that we're not designed to do it alone. We're designed to receive things that God desires for us to receive from others. Which is why it's so important for us to learn what are the spiritual gifts that God has given me, and then exercise those gifts. Everyone has one. But see, this is where we introduce a new idea in light of unity. Because unity is not uniformity. Do you understand what I'm saying? Unity is not uniformity. Not everyone's going to be identical. Not everyone's going to have the same gifts. And thank goodness they're not. See, this is where biblical unity shows up with diversity. See, true biblical unity is only in light of diversity. Diversity in every way. Diversity in the sense of what we think, diversity in the sense of how we look, the gifts that God has given us. He is intended for his church to be a diverse church, but that is unified. Remember, unity, not uniformity. Again, the church needs you and you need the church. He gave gifts that you need to other people, and he gave gifts to you that others need from you. Everyone has a gift, and it's not for us, it's for others. Now, verse 9 and 10 is where we're going to be finishing up. Notice that it says he ascended. This clearly means that Christ also descended to our lowly world. And the same one who descended is the one who ascended higher than all the heavens so that he might fill the entire universe with himself. Now, there are about 10 different interpretations of what it means that he descended. Man, here's my take, is that he leaves heaven and he comes to earth. Meaning he leaves what is perfect, he leaves what is not tainted, and he comes to our tainted world to live among us. But he didn't stay here, he ascended. And when he ascended, why did he do it? That he might fill the entire universe with himself. And how does he do that? Through the church. Through you and I. That's how he fills the universe with himself. Now, there's a lot we could say about this. I want to simplify and just say, when he ascended on high, I want you to know it gives him, and we see all throughout the scripture, we could point to a lot of references, but what I do want you to see is that he now has the authority to distribute gifts in the ways that he sees fit. I think you have a gift, but it's not one that you get to select from a menu. It's one that he's given you in the context of the church you're part of. Now, I already said to you once, but I want to remind you this is not a perfect church. Not only is it not now, it never will be. And if you ever find a perfect church, don't go there because it won't be anymore. All right? If you ever find a perfect church, just know you probably aren't alive anymore. All right? They don't exist. But perfect isn't the goal. Healthy is the goal. The goal isn't a perfect church, it's a healthy church. And we're a church that desires not to be a big church, not to be a growing church, but to be a healthy church. And here's the thing, and we're going to get into this next week, in week 2, but the inevitable result of a healthy church is a growing church. It's impossible for a healthy church to not grow. But a healthy church is not a church for just a few. A healthy church is a church for all people. A healthy church is that it's for all people. I want you to know this church exists to equip all people to find and follow Jesus. Whether you're here and you believe in Jesus fully, awesome, glad you're here. If you're here and you're not sure about any of these things, great, I'm glad you're here. This church is for you. If you think all of it's insane and you think it's all stupid, cool, this church is for you. Come and be part of a community where you're going to be loved well and cared for well in ways that you haven't seen before. And here's the last question I want us to look at is who can be part of this thing? Like who can be part of the church? And the answer is anyone. The guy who wrote this letter, again, was named Paul. Paul was someone who literally persecuted Christians. He hunted them down, would imprison them and kill them. He has this crazy encounter with Jesus, and he ends up becoming a missionary, and the very families that he wrecked and destroyed welcomed him back into their families. Can you imagine just for a moment if someone murdered the people that you love and then came around and you said, you know what? Come on in. Like, come into my family. Do you know how crazy that sounds? There's no community like that in the world except for the church. It's the one place that no matter our story, no matter our sin, no matter what we believe, we can belong and be part of it. There's no other community like it. Maybe you've wondered, why waste my time? How would this ever change the world? It won't, because we get in a building and we gather. It's when we love one another, we live in unity in this way, where we don't look at people's stories and decide whether they can be part of it or not. But we just love people because they were made in God's image. We love people because he loved us first. Because in our sin and because of our brokenness, we were loved. We turn around and we get to love others. Man, Paul, as a person who murdered Christians, is the man writing this letter. I don't know what your story is, but I want you to know you can be part of the church. Our pursuit as Blacksburg Church, as a local assembly, is not to be a big church. It's to be a healthy church. It's not to be a church that has great Sunday mornings. It's not to be a church that has great preaching. It's not to be a church that has incredible worship. All those things are cool, and I hope we have all those things. But first and foremost, we have to be a healthy church, and according to Jesus, a healthy church is a united church, and a united church is not possible because a few choose to be united. It's when you choose to be united. It's when you choose. I want to close and just read to you from Galatians chapter 2. This is that same man, Paul, same one I just described. He writes this letter to the church in Galatia. And listen to what he says. I'm sorry, Galatians chapter 3, not chapter 2. This is going to be just a little bit, but hang in there with me and listen to these words from that man that I just described to you. O foolish Galatians, who has cast an evil spell on you? For the meaning of Jesus Christ's death was made as clear to you as if you had seen a picture of his death on the cross. Let me ask you this one question. Did you receive the Holy Spirit by obeying the law of Moses? Of course not. You received the Spirit because you believed the message you heard about Christ. How foolish can you be? After starting your new lives in the Spirit, why are you now trying to become perfect by your own human effort? Have you experienced so much for nothing? Surely it was not in vain, was it? I ask you again, does God give you the Holy Spirit and work miracles among you because you obey the law? Of course not. It is because you believe the message you heard about Christ. In the same way, Abraham believed God and counted him as righteous because of his faith. The real children of Abraham, then, are those who put their faith in God. What Paul is referencing here was a promise that God made to Abraham. Some of you maybe know this story. If you don't, let me tell you briefly. God made a promise to a man named Abraham that he would be a blessing to the entire world. An old man who had no children, and he said his descendants would be many. And Abraham's like, what in the how am I going to be a blessing to the whole world? But God says, I want to make a covenant with you. In other words, a covenant's like a contract. It's a promise that God makes. And specifically, he wanted to make a blood covenant. And a blood covenant, sorry if it's gross for you, hang in there. What is a blood covenant is where they would take two animals, they would take an animal and they would split the animal in half. And then the two parties that are making this agreement would walk between the two animals. And here was what they were saying. If either of us breaks this covenant, let it be done to me as it was done to this animal. That's what a blood covenant was. And so Abraham agrees to make a blood covenant with God. But when they show up to walk through to make this covenant, God doesn't let Abraham walk through. Instead, God walks through for God, and then God walks through for Abraham. Meaning what God promised to Abraham was, I'm going to hold up my end of the bargain and yours. Meaning no one else, not you, because you're going to fail. I'm going to hold up my end and yours. This promise will be fulfilled, not because you're faithful to it, but because I'm faithful to it. And that promise is the promise that we then receive when we trust in Jesus. Not that we're good, not that we're going to hold up our end of the bargain, because you and I are not going to. We're not perfect. We're going to fail. We're going to fall short over and over and over again. And guess what? God's going to hold up his end of the bargain and ours because we believed in Jesus. That promise doesn't just belong to Abraham. What did he say? It belongs to all who believe and put their faith in Jesus. See, for us to be a united church, I believe we have to have that context. We have to understand that we're not perfect, that we're not all of these things. We have to understand that it's by Him being good. It's by His faithfulness that all these things come true, and then we can turn around and do the same for others. Now, I want you to know, if you've never accepted that promise, you've never said, you know what, I want to be someone who is a receiver of that promise. Look at what he says. It's for all who put their faith in Jesus. And if you haven't put your faith in Jesus, that's what's available to you. A promise made, an eternity with God, life not just in the future, but life now. Again, not because you're good, because He's good. He doesn't care what you walked in here with this morning. He doesn't care if you came in a little drunk this morning. He doesn't care if you're still trying to clean yourself up. It doesn't matter. What matters is His goodness. What matters is that He's good, and we come under that and trust Him, and He changes us from there. Man, you don't have to clean yourself up this morning. Instead, you just get to come and submit to Him, trust Him, put your faith in Him, and by that faith, we're saved. We have the promise that God made to Abraham. Not that we'll be good on the other side, but that He is good.